Welcome to Project Command. I'm Captain Peter Eunice, and I'll be your host. On today's episode, we're going to talk about why working with IT is critical for fire service projects. And I'm going to give you my 7 rules for working well with IT. But first, if you're enjoying this podcast, it really helps us if you like, follow, or share this episode with a friend. Remember that every share helps more fire service professionals learn the skills and mindset to deliver stronger, smarter projects. Now, let's get to the episode. Welcome, everyone. Today, we're going to focus on how to work well with your IT section. And this is really important in the modern fire service because pretty much every project is an IT project. Because technology is so prolific in fire service administration and fire service operations, it's very difficult to imagine that you're ever going to be able to run a project that doesn't in some way impact IT. And with that being said, what I've learned is that if you work well with IT, they can be a tremendous force multiplier. They can help you figure out systems problems and permissions issues. They can help you get that new technology rollout up and running. They can help set up a support or a help desk. But when we don't work well with IT, when we don't include them, when we present information to them the wrong way, or when we fail to understand what they need from us, it can be a real hindrance. It can slow things down. It can create unnecessary lag in a project. And importantly, it can lead to some really negative outcomes at the end of a project. So with that being said, let's jump into my 7 rules for working with IT. Okay, rule number 1, bring them a problem, not a product. Now, what I mean by this is a lot of times when we're figuring something out for a project or just looking at something that we want to get done as a fire department, because we're go-getters, we like to get things done. A lot of times we'll pick out exactly how we want it to go, and we'll go to our IT section and we'll say something like, hey, we've already picked out the software. We just need you to install it and make it work. Now, this could be something like Telestaff, where we just pick out a product and we say, hey, this is the product we want to meet our staffing needs. Hey, IT, figure out a way to make this work. Or maybe we are setting up a new way to document drug use and medication administration in the field. And we say, hey, IT, we want to go with Vector Check-It. This is the one we want. Make it work. And there's a couple problems with that. The first problem is if we just kind of turn that around and put the shoe on the other foot. Imagine if we pull up to a fire and the homeowner runs out and they start telling us how to put the fire out. They say, hey, pull a line, take it to the back of the house, put a ladder there, cut the roof here. We wouldn't really like that. And the reason is because we know how to do our job, presumably, a lot better than they do. And the same is true for IT. We might know the specific use case of what we're trying to do, but when it comes to how to make systems communicate with each other, or how to protect data security, or how to not compromise our firewall, or all these other important IT things, the average firefighter or fire officer doesn't really understand these things, and they certainly don't understand them as well as our IT folks. And so for that reason, it's much better to, instead of bringing them the product and saying, hey, just make this work, maybe instead it's better to go to them with the problem that we're trying to solve and let's solve it together with them. So that could look something like setting up a meeting at the beginning of a project. Let's say the project is to implement a new staffing software to handle staffing. Instead of waiting until we've already picked it out and then telling our IT people, hey, make this work, we should include them at the very beginning and say, we need a software that will do X, Y, and Z. It, is able to talk to this system. It's able to page these people and on. And let them help develop the product or the solution with us so that they're able, from a very early point in the project, to make sure that the system can talk to our other critical systems, to make sure that it's not going to overload our servers, to make sure that the data can be stored and protected, and on. Okay. Rule number 2, When you're working with IT and you need them to do something for you, you have to tell them who it impacts and how. And so for this one, try to remember that project management is actually native to IT. Now, the IT world didn't invent project management, but they are early adopters and they've been using that framework for a long time. And so for that reason, they think in terms of scope. And recall that when we're building our scope, we need to build that scope with requirements. Like, what does this scope at the end of this project, what do we need to do in order to meet the specific requirements of our project? And so for that reason, we want to come to them with a lot of detailed information, like how many users is this system going to have? What devices does it need to run on? How many fire stations are we going to need to, or fire engines are we going to need to put it in? And how does it integrate with existing systems? So let's think about this from a firefighter's perspective. If I came to you and I said, hey, we're going to put a new hose load on the engine, and we're trying to decide between a triple layer, a Minuteman, and a flat load. Which one do you think we should do? Well, it's going to be difficult to answer that question if you don't have more information. You know, how big are the trays? Do you have speed trays or do you have cross lays? What kind of setbacks do you have in your neighborhood? Are these houses, right off the street, or is it a 200-foot setback from the street to the house? These are all going to be really important pieces of information to have when you're trying to pick which hose load you're going to do. And likewise with IT, when we're communicating with them about what we need, giving them those specifics about the workflows and what specifically we're going to need for this piece of work we're asking them to help us with is really important in helping them shape how they're going to go about doing the work. So in summary, what we want to do is we want to give our IT section the full operational footprint so that they can architect responsibly, so they can put together a system that works the way we want it to. All right, rule number 3. We want to show them the life cycle of a product, not just the go live. Now, what do I mean by that? So projects that have a large technology component create ongoing responsibilities. And this is something that on the fire side, we tend to miss sometimes. So think about things like licenses, renewals, like Office 365. Everybody that uses Office 365 has to have a license, and somebody has to, administrate or be the administrator for those licenses and then renew those licenses. There's going to be training and user onboarding. If you're rolling out Microsoft Planner, for example, someone's going to have to provide training. Someone's going to have to onboard new users. There's going to be issues that we run into that are going to require some sort of a software patch or updates, or just cybersecurity needs. Like maybe there's an issue with the host server or something like that. We're going to need somebody to help us with troubleshooting and support tickets. And finally, we may need to have hardware replacements, and that's going to require some degree of planning because that's probably a capital expense, or maybe there's an RFP or a budgetary process that needs to get done. So the point I'm trying to make here is that whenever we put new technology in, it's not just a matter of, hey, we bought this new system, let's install it and we're good to go. There's a lot of things that we're going to need to consider after we roll that technology out. And so for that reason, whenever we communicate these things with IT, we want to take the time at the beginning to figure out who's going to be responsible for all of these things moving forward. Because if we don't address that, we're going to I guess I should take a step back. We're going to have to address it eventually. You can either address it at the beginning of a project, or you can wait till it becomes an issue and problems start to pop up and there's nobody to do troubleshooting and there's no hardware replacement budget. So now we need new equipment and we can't pay for it. So it's really important to consider the life cycle of the equipment, not just what it takes to get it in service. Remember, if no one owns the life cycle, IT is going to get stuck with it forever, and they know it. So they're going to want these things to be ironed out on the front end. So, quick summary of that. Before you launch new products, technology products, you need to figure out who's going to maintain it, who's going to support the end users, and how are standards updated over time. One more quick little side note here. A really important part of any project, and I did an episode on how to close a project the right way, but a really important part of any project is if a project is just a one-off thing, then it's still important to close it right. But typically projects turn into programs, or a better way to think of that is every program has to start as a project. And so it's really important at the end of a project to figure out how are we going to transition this project into a program, meaning somebody's keeping an eye on it, somebody's responsible for it, et cetera, et cetera. And there's no more important time to think about that than on technology projects. Okay, rule number 4. Understand that IT's risk tolerance is very different from our risk tolerance. Now, this is important to keep in mind because there are some things that IT will do on a project that are going to slow us down. Maybe they want to do some pilot testing. Maybe they want to deploy new technology to a few stations before they push it out to everybody. And there's a lot of examples of that. But it's important to remember that, yeah, we're on the same team as IT, but our priorities are different. We want to get things done typically fast, and they're preventing catastrophic things from happening. That's the main objective of IT. Yes, there's a help desk and a support element, but the big thing that they're trying to avoid is catastrophic issues with the system. Dispatch outages, corrupted medical data, or maybe some sort of a ransomware, or just permanent loss of critical systems. And yes, those can be permanent losses of critical systems. So they're going to come at this from a very different perspective than us. We look to get things done, and they're looking to protect. So it's important to keep this in mind because sometimes we can just think, they don't want to get this done. They don't care about this as much as we do, or they just want to stand in our way or be bureaucratic about stuff. And that's not really the issue. The issue is that they need to protect the critical infrastructure, the critical IT infrastructure of the city or county. So just keep this in mind, and bear in mind, they're going to slow some things down sometimes, but at the end of the day, if there's a huge issue, something happens with the system, they're going to be on the hook for it, not us. And so just keep that in mind when we work with them. All right, rule number 5. Respect their process. And what this really means is fill out the ticket. Now, every single person that's listening to this has almost certainly heard, did you submit a ticket? You go to IT, you want them to help you with something, add something to the SharePoint, or help you get a system to talk to another system, and the next thing they say is, did you submit a ticket? Now, if you're anything like me, you're thinking, forget about the ticket. Can't you just do it and we'll move on? And the answer is no. And so I want to take, and just that's just not how IT works, unfortunately. And I wanted to take a minute now and just kind of explain why IT is so into this ticketing system. There's a few benefits to a ticketing system for IT. Well, actually, there's several benefits. The first is it gives them a sense of accountability. So who asked for things and who approved it. And so they just need to be able to demonstrate audit trails for certain systems or compliance requirements. Additionally, it gives them knowledge continuity, which means that as the department turns over, they're still going to have that institutional knowledge of why things were done and who implemented it, when it was implemented, and so on and so forth. It also gives them a sense of priority clarity. And this is because the reality is everybody thinks what they're doing is critical. And so everybody's going to submit their tickets. They think it's really important. This gives them a way to look at all of the work that's being requested of them and figure out which is actually the priority. And lastly, it gives them what's called workload evidence. And this is just a way for them to show how many projects they have, how much is being requested of them to justify potential workforce expansion or to justify overtime expenditures or whatever. Just a way for them to say, hey, this is the work we're doing as evidenced by these tickets in addition to the other things that they're doing. And so for those reasons, you got to fill out the ticket. And moreover, filling out the ticket is a way of showing our IT folks that we respect their processes, we need their help, but we don't want to steamroll them. We are aware that they have a lot of people asking them for a lot of things. And this is just a way for us to respect their process and show them that we want to collaborate, we want to work together, not just steamroll them and just make them do all the things that we want them to do at the expense of the other work they have. Okay, the next is we want to communicate timelines clearly. And this is really just true for any stakeholder that you're going to run a project with. This is so important, especially in the beginning of a project, because a lot of times people will have a different understanding of how quickly this work needs to be done. So you might pitch a project and they don't realize, hey, this is actually really critical for us and we really need to get this done in the next month. Or inversely, yeah, this is kind of like a wishboard thing and this is probably not going to get done for another year or so. And it's really important because when we set up meetings with IT or we invite them to a team meeting or whatever, they may not have an understanding of where this project fits into the grand scheme of things. And so it's really important to communicate with them what our expected timeline is for the project, but also just for the work that we're doing. So communicate these timelines clearly. And so to zoom in on that a little bit, we're talking about things like deadlines, operational impacts, training windows, like, hey, we're going to roll out this new fire reporting system. And December 1st is the go live, but we need to start training on it 2 months ahead of time. And in order to train, we need this, this, and this. That's what I mean when I say training windows. Help them understand not just when we're going live with it, but when we're going to hit those important milestones. When are we going to train? When are we looking to purchase the software? When do we want to have it up and running? When are we going to do a quality audit? That kind of stuff. Okay. Last, but definitely most important, include IT as a stakeholder, if not a member of the project team. Now, guys, if you take nothing else away from this episode, please remember rule number 7, include IT as a stakeholder, if not a member of the project team. And what this means is get them involved in the project at the very beginning, regardless of what you call them, whether they're a stakeholder or a project team member, it doesn't really matter. I mean, it does matter, but the more important is just get them involved early, because it's very difficult for me to imagine any project in the fire service that isn't going to have some element of, let's just say data or connectivity or hardware, software, system security, user access, or just some sort of a system integration. So because all those things I just named are going to be a part of pretty much every project, it's very safe to assume that you have IT work that needs to get done. And if you wait till something's broken or something's on fire, then you try to bring in IT, first of all, it's going to slow your project down, because whatever time, okay, let's just think this through for a second. Let's say we're doing a 3-month project and the aim of the project is to roll out some technology. And we get halfway through and all of a sudden we realize this isn't going to work because this system won't run on the MDCs in our suppression units. It only runs on a desktop. And so now we bring in IT and we're frantic and we say, hey, we've already bought this thing. We've programmed it, but it won't work on these MDCs. Help us. Now, maybe they can fix it and maybe they can't. But regardless, it's going to take them a long time because now they have to figure out everything we've done, the decision points, what we've messed with, then try to figure out a solution. Versus if we had brought them in at the beginning of the project, the likelihood is that, first of all, they would have just caught this at the beginning and they would have said, hey, I don't think this is going to work because this won't work on an MDC. But even if they hadn't caught that, now they have all the background and context of the project, so they're going to be much more able to troubleshoot problems and figure out how to make things work. But also, if we bring them in at the beginning of a project, we're going to avoid a very serious pitfall, which is IT hours, meaning the number of hours that they can contribute to work on your project, is a finite resource. And they are always very busy. IT is always busy, they're always understaffed, and they always have a million things going on. So if you don't include them till later on in a project, what you're very likely going to run into is competing priorities. They're going to say, yeah, I mean, I hear you, you need help, but we just don't have the people for that. And so your thing is going to get put at the back of the line. And or maybe worse yet, we just can't support that project at all. We don't have any bandwidth for the next 3 or 4 months, and you guys need it done in this time frame, so that's just not going to work at all. Now your project could potentially die on the vine, or you're going to have to, cut in line and, kind of butt somebody else's project out. So we really want to avoid that. This is just not a good practice, and it could potentially result in a lot of wasted resources. So again, really, really important here that we include IT either as a stakeholder or just a member of the project team. And one more thing I want to say about that, a lot of times what I'll do is I will look for whatever the most technical element of the project is, and I will assign a technical lead. Now, here's what I mean by that. If I'm running an IT project, I'm going to pick an IT person to be my technical lead, meaning that they're going to run point on all of the nitty-gritty technical stuff. Now, if I'm running a training project, for example, I need to train, 40 people on something. I might pick a training person as my technical lead. If it's a policy development project and there's going to be a lot of back and forth with HR, maybe I'll pick an HR person as my technical lead. The technical lead is the person with subject matter expertise on the type of project that you're running. All right, let's quickly run through those one more time. Rule number 1, when you work with IT, bring them the problem, not the product or the solution. Include them in the process of developing that solution. Don't just go to them and hand them something and say, this is what we want, now install it. Okay? Rule number 2, tell them who it impacts and how. We're giving them all the information that they need to develop their scope. How many users, how many devices, and what devices, what stations, how many apparatus, what do we need it to integrate with, what do we need it to talk to. All right? Rule number 3, show the life cycle, not just the go live. Number 4, their risk tolerance is very different from our risk tolerances. So just remember that we're looking at this from 2 different perspectives. Okay, rule number 5, respect their process and fill out the ticket. As much as we don't like to do it, we really need to fill out the support tickets, the IT support tickets. They provide accountability, audit trails, knowledge continuity, priority clarity, and workload evidence. Rule number 6, communicate timelines clearly. When do you need something by? If you need it in a hurry, communicating that. And then also the milestones. When do we want to roll it out? When do we want to train on it? When do we think we're going to be purchasing the software? All that stuff. So communicate those timelines clearly. And lastly, and most importantly, include IT early and often. Either have them be a stakeholder on the project, or better yet, just put them on the project team if you think you're going to need them. This helps us avoid rework, rejected solutions, security failures, budget surprises, and the old classic, everybody's favorite, we didn't know about this until just now. Guys, the last thing I want to leave you with is a quote that I really like, which is, operations move at the speed of trust. And it's not just about having trust between you and your boss, or you and the chief, or even you and your project team. It's about building trust with all of your stakeholders, all of the people that are going to contribute to your project. And we build trust through transparency and respect. Respect their processes, listen to their feedback, and include them early and often. Thanks for joining us on today's episode of Project Command. And if you have a question or a topic you'd like us to cover, please send us an email at projectcommandpodcast@gmail.com. That's projectcommandpodcast@gmail.com. We'll do our best to answer either directly or on air in a future episode.